Welcome to a fireside reading of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. Chapter 52, I Assist in an Explosion. When the time Mr. Micawber had appointed so mysteriously was within 24 hours of being come, my aunt and I consulted how we should proceed, for my aunt was very unwilling to leave Dora. Ah, how easily I carried Dora up and down stairs now. We were disposed, notwithstanding Mr. Micawber's stipulation for my aunt's attendance, to arrange that she should stay at home and be represented by Mr. Dick and me. In short, we had resolved to take this course when Dora again unsettled us by declaring that she never would forgive herself and never would forgive her bad boy if my aunt remained behind on any pretense. "I won't speak to you," said Dora, shaking her curls at my aunt. "I'll be disagreeable. I'll make Jip bark at you all day. I shall be sure that you really are a cross old thing if you don't go." "Tut, Blossom," laughed my aunt. "You know you can't do without me." "Yes, I can," said Dora. "You are no use to me at all. You never run up and down stairs for me all day long. You never sit and tell me stories about Dodie when his shoes were worn out and he was covered with dust. Oh, what a poor little mite of a fellow. You never do anything at all to please me. Do you, dear?" Dora made haste to kiss my aunt and say, "Yes, you do. I'm only joking," lest my aunt should think she really meant it. "But, aunt," said Dora coaxingly, "now listen, you must go. I shall tease you till you let me have my own way about it. I shall lead my naughty boy such a life if he don't make you go. I shall make myself so disagreeable, and so will Jip. You'll wish you had gone like a good thing for ever and ever so long if you don't go. Besides," said Dora, putting back her hair and looking wonderingly at my aunt and me, "why shouldn't you both go? I am not very ill indeed. Am I?" "Why, what a question!" cried my aunt. "What a fancy!" said I. "Yes, I know I am a silly little thing," said Dora, slowly looking from one of us to the other, and then putting up her pretty lips to kiss us as she lay upon her couch. "Well then, you must both go, or I shall not believe you, and then I shall cry." I saw in my aunt's face that she began to give way now, and Dora brightened again as she saw it too. "You'll come back with so much to tell me that it'll last at least a week to make me understand," said Dora, "because I know I shan't understand for a length of time if there's any business in it, and there's sure to be some business in it. If there's anything to add up besides, I don't know when I shall make it out, and my bad boy will look so miserable all the time. There, now you'll go, won't you? You'll only be gone one night, and Jip will take care of me while you're gone. Dodie will carry me upstairs before you go, and I won't come down until you come back. And you shall take Agnes a dreadful scolding letter from me because she has never been to see us." We agreed, without any more consultation, that we would both go, and that Dora was a little impostor who feigned to be rather unwell because she liked to be petted. She was greatly pleased and very merry, and we four, that is to say, my aunt, Mr. Dick, Traddles, and I, went down to Canterbury by the Dover mail that night. At the hotel where Mr. Micawber had requested us to await him, which we got into with some trouble in the middle of the night, I found a letter importing that he would appear in the morning punctually at 9:30, after which we went shivering at that uncomfortable hour to our respective beds through various close passages which smelt as if they'd been steeped for ages in a solution of soup and stables. Early in the morning I sauntered through the dear old tranquil streets and again mingled with the shadows of the venerable gateways and churches. The rooks were sailing about the cathedral towers, and the towers themselves, overlooking many a long, unaltered mile of the rich country and its pleasant streams, were cutting the bright morning air as if there were no such thing as change on earth. Yet the bells, when they sounded, told me sorrowfully of change in everything, told me of their own age and my pretty Dora's youth, and of the many never old who had lived and loved and died, while the reverberations of the bells had hummed through the rusty armor of the Black Prince, hanging up within, and motes upon the deep of time had lost themselves in air, as circles do in water. I looked at the old house from the corner of the street, but did not go nearer to it, lest, being observed, I might unwittingly do any harm to the design I had come to aid. The early sun was striking edgewise on its gables and lattice windows, touching them with gold, and some beams of its old piece seemed to touch my heart. I strolled into the country for an hour or so, and then returned by the main street, which in the interval had shaken off its last night's sleep. Among those who were stirring in the shops, I saw my ancient enemy, the butcher, now advanced to top boots and a baby, and in business for himself. He was nursing the baby, and appeared to be a benignant member of society. We all became very anxious and impatient when we sat down to breakfast. As it approached nearer and nearer to 9:30, our restless expectation of Mr. Micawber increased. At last we made no more pretence of attending to the meal, which, except with Mr. Dick, had been a mere form from the first, but my aunt walked up and down the room. Traddles sat upon the sofa affecting to read the paper with his eyes upon the ceiling, and I looked out of the window to give early notice of Mr. Micawber's coming. Nor had I long to watch, for at the first chime of the half-hour he appeared in the street. "Here he is," said I, "and not in his legal attire." My aunt tied the strings of her bonnet, she had come down to breakfast in it, and put on her shawl, as if she were ready for anything that was resolute and uncompromising. Traddles buttoned his coat with a determined air. Mr. Dick, disturbed by these formidable appearances, but feeling it necessary to imitate them, pulled his hat with both hands as firmly over his ears as he possibly could, and instantly took it off again to welcome Mr. Micawber. "Gentlemen and madam," said Mr. Micawber, "good morning." "My dear sir," to Mr. Dick, who shook hands with him violently, "you are extremely good." "Have you breakfasted?" said Mr. Dick. "Have a chop." "Not for the world, my good sir," cried Mr. Micawber, stopping him on his way to the bell. "Appetite and myself, Mr. Dickson, have long been strangers." Mr. Dickson was so well pleased with his new name, and appeared to think it so obliging in Mr. Micawber to confer it upon him, that he shook hands with him again, and laughed rather childishly. "Dick," said my aunt, "attention." Mr. Dick recovered himself with a blush. "Now, sir," said my aunt to Mr. Micawber as she put on her gloves, "we are ready for Mount Vesuvius, or anything else, as soon as you please." "Madam," returned Mr. Micawber, "I trust you will shortly witness an eruption. Mr. Traddles, I have your permission, I believe, to mention here that we have been in communication together?" "It is undoubtedly the fact, Copperfield," said Traddles, to whom I looked in surprise. Mr. Micawber has consulted me in reference to what he has in contemplation, and I have advised him to the best of my judgment. Unless I deceive myself, Mr. Traddles, pursued Mr. Micawber, what I contemplate is a disclosure of an important nature. Highly so, said Traddles. Perhaps under such circumstances, madam and gentlemen, said Mr. Micawber, you will do me the favour to submit yourselves for the moment to the direction of one who, however unworthy to be regarded in any other light but as a waif and stray upon the shore of human nature, is still your fellow man, though crushed out of his original form by individual errors and the accumulative force of a combination of circumstances. We have perfect confidence in you, Mr. Micawber, said I, and will do what you please. Mr. Copperfield, returned Mr. Micawber, your confidence is not, at the existing juncture, ill bestowed. I would beg to be allowed a start of 5 minutes by the clock, and then to receive the present company inquiring for Miss Wickfield at the office of Wickfield and Heap, whose stipendiary I am. My aunt and I looked at Traddles, who nodded his approval. I have no more, observed Mr. Micawber, to say at present. With which, to my infinite surprise, he included us all in a comprehensive bow and disappeared, his manner being extremely distant and his face extremely pale. Traddles only smiled and shook his head, with his hair standing upright on the top of it, when I looked at him for an explanation. So I took out my watch and, as a last resource, counted off the 5 minutes. My aunt, with her own watch in her hand, did the like. When the time was expired, Traddles gave her his arm, and we all went out together to the old house, without saying one word on the way. We found Mr. Micawber at his desk in the turret office on the ground floor, either writing or pretending to write hard. The large office ruler was stuck into his waistcoat and was not so well concealed but that a foot or more of that instrument protruded from his bosom like a new kind of shirt frill. As it appeared to me that I was expected to speak, I said aloud, "How do you do, Mr. Micawber?" "Mr. Copperfield," said Mr. Micawber gravely, "I hope I see you well." "Is Miss Wickfield at home?" said I. "Mr. Wickfield is unwell in bed, sir, of a rheumatic fever," he returned. "But Miss Wickfield, I have no doubt, will be happy to see old friends. Will you walk in, sir?" He preceded us to the dining room, the first room I'd entered in that house, and flinging open the door of Mr. Wickfield's former office, said in a sonorous voice, "Miss Trotwood, Mr. David Copperfield, Mr. Thomas Traddles, and Mr. Dickson." I had not seen Uriah Heep since the time of the blow. Our visit astonished him, evidently, not the less, I dare say, because it astonished ourselves. He did not gather his eyebrows together, for he had none worth mentioning, but he frowned to that degree that he almost closed his small eyes, while the hurried raising of his grisly hand to his chin betrayed some trepidation or surprise. This was only when we were in the act of entering his room, and when I caught a glance at him over my aunt's shoulder. A moment afterwards, he was as fawning and as humble as ever. "Well, I am sure," he said,
this is indeed an unexpected pleasure. To have, as I may say, all friends round St. Paul's at once is a treat unlooked for. Mr. Copperfield, I hope I see you well, and, if I may humbly express myself so, friendly towards them as is ever your friends, whether or not. Mrs. Copperfield, sir, I hope she's getting on. We have been made quite uneasy by the poor accounts we've had of her state lately, I do assure you.
I felt ashamed to let him take my hand, but I did not know yet what else to do.
Things are changed in this office, Miss Trotwood, since I was an humble clerk and held your pony, ain't they? Said Uriah with his sickliest smile. But I am not changed, Miss Trotwood.
Well, sir, returned my aunt, to tell you the truth, I think you are pretty constant to the promise of your youth, if that's any satisfaction to you.
Thank you, Miss Trotwood, said Uriah, writhing in his ungainly manner, for your good opinion. Micawber, tell him to let Miss Agnes know, and Mother will be quite in a state when she sees the present company, said Uriah, setting chairs.
You are not busy, Mr. Heap, said Traddles, whose eye the cunning red eye accidentally caught, as it at once scrutinized and evaded us.
No, Mr. Traddles, replied Uriah, resuming his official seat and squeezing his bony hands, laid palm to palm between his bony knees, not so much as I could wish. But lawyers, sharks, and leeches are not easily satisfied, you know. Not but what myself and Micawber have our hands pretty full in general on account of Mr. Wickfield's being hardly fit for any occupation, sir, but it's a pleasure as well as a duty, I'm sure, to work for him. You've not been intimate with Mr. Wickfield, I think, Mr. Traddles. I believe I've only had the honour of seeing you once myself.
No, I have not been intimate with Mr. Wickfield, returned Traddles, or I might perhaps have waited on you long ago, Mr. Heap. There was something in the tone of this reply which made Uriah look at the speaker again with a very sinister and suspicious expression. But seeing only Traddles, with his good-natured face, simple manner, and hair on end, he dismissed it as he replied with a jerk of his whole body, but especially his throat, I am sorry for that, Mr. Traddles. You would have admired him as much as we all do. His little failings would only have endeared him to you the more, but if you would like to hear my fellow partner eloquently spoken of, I should refer you to Copperfield. The family is a subject he's very strong upon, if you never heard him. I was prevented from disclaiming the compliment, if I should have done so in any case, by the entrance of Agnes, now ushered in by Mr. Micawber. She was not quite so self-possessed as usual, I thought, and had evidently undergone anxiety and fatigue. But her earnest cordiality and her quiet beauty shone with the gentle lustre for it. I saw Uriah watch her while she greeted us, and he reminded me of an ugly and rebellious genie watching a good spirit. In the meanwhile, some slight sign passed between Mr. Micawber and Traddles, unobserved except by me, went out.
"Don't wait, Micawber," said Uriah.
Mr. Micawber, with his hand upon the ruler in his breast, stood erect before the door, most unmistakably contemplating one of his fellow men, and that man his employer.
"What are you waiting for?" said Uriah. "Micawber, did you not hear me tell you not to wait?"
"Yes," replied the immovable Mr. Micawber.
"Then why do you wait?" said Uriah.
"Because, in short, I choose," replied Mr. Micawber with a burst. Uriah's cheeks lost colour, and an unwholesome paleness, still faintly tinged by his pervading red, overspread them. He looked at Mr. Micawber attentively, with his whole face breathing short and quick in every feature.
"You are a dissipated fellow, as all the world knows," he said, with an effort at a smile. "And I am obliged and afraid, and I am afraid you'll oblige me to get rid of you. Go along. I'll talk to you presently."
"If there is a scoundrel on this earth," said Mr. Micawber, suddenly breaking out again with the utmost vehemence, "with whom I have already talked too much, that scoundrel's name is Heap." Uriah fell back as if he'd been struck or stung. Looking slowly round upon us with the darkest and wickedest expression that his face could wear, he said in a lower voice,
"Oh, this is a conspiracy. You have met here by appointment. You are playing booty with my clerk, are you, Copperfield? Now take care. You'll make nothing of this. We understand each other, you and me. There's no love between us. You were always a puppy with a proud stomach from your first coming here. And you envy me my rise, do you? None of your plots against me. I'll counterplot you. Micawber, you be off. I'll talk to you presently."
"Mr. Micawber," said I, "there is a sudden change in this fellow, in more respects than the extraordinary one of his speaking the truth in one particular, which assures me that he is brought to bay. Deal with him as he deserves."
"You are a precious set of people, ain't you?" said Uriah in the same low voice, and breaking out into a clammy heat which he wiped from his forehead with his long, lean hand, "to buy over my clerk, who is the very scum of society. As you yourself were, Copperfield, you know it before anyone had charity on you. To defame me with his lies? Miss Trotwood, you had better stop this, or I'll stop your husband. Shorter than will be pleasant to you." "I don't know your story professionally for nothing, old lady. Miss Wickfield, if you have any love for your father, you had better not join that gang. I'll ruin him if you do. Now come, I have got some of you under the harrow. Think twice before it goes over you. Think twice you, Micawber, if you don't want to be crushed. I recommend you to take yourself off and be talked to presently, you fool, while there's time to retreat. Where's mother?" he said, suddenly appearing to notice with alarm the absence of Traddles, and pulling down the bell rope. "Fine doings in a person's own house."
"Mrs. Heap is here, sir," said Traddles, returning with that worthy mother of a worthy son. "I have taken the liberty of making myself known to her."
"Who are you to make yourself known?" retorted Uriah. "And what do you want here?"
"I am the agent and friend of Mr. Wickfield, sir," said Traddles in a composed and businesslike way, "and I have a power of attorney from him in my pocket to act for him in all matters."
"The old ass has drunk himself into a state of dotage," said Uriah, turning uglier than before, "and it has been got from him by fraud."
"Something has been got from him by fraud, I know," returned Traddles quietly, "and so do you, Mr. Heap. We will refer that question, if you please, to Mr. Micawber."
"Uri,"
said Mrs. Heap, with an anxious gesture.
"You hold your tongue, mother," he returned. "Least said, soonest mended."
"But my Uri—"
"Will you hold your tongue, mother, and leave it to me?"
Though I had long known that his servility was false, and all his pretences knavish and hollow, I had had no adequate conception of the extent of his hypocrisy, until I now saw him with his mask off. The suddenness with which he dropped it when he perceived that it was useless to him, the malice, insolence, and hatred he revealed, the leer with which he exulted, even at this moment, in the evil he had done, all this time being desperate too, and at his wit's end for the means of getting the better of us, though perfectly consistent with the experience I had of him, at first took even me by surprise, who had known him so long and disliked him so heartily. I say nothing of the look he conferred on me as he stood eyeing us one after another, for I had always understood that he hated me, and I remembered the marks of my hand upon his cheek. But when his eyes passed onto Agnes, and I saw the rage with which he felt his power over her slipping away, and the exhibition in their disappointment of the odious passions that had led him to aspire to one whose virtues he could never appreciate or care for, I was shocked by the mere thought of her having lived an hour within sight of such a man. This is a long chapter, and we have a lot to look forward to. We'll read the second part of it tomorrow at the same time, 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram, live, and all the chapters uploaded to the YouTube channel Fireside Reading pretty soon thereafter. Thanks so much for joining me. Thank you all for your support, and I look forward to seeing you all very much tomorrow. Until then, please stay very well. Good night.